Maria Santos had always been small. At 5 feet 2 inches and barely 120 pounds, she looked more like someone you'd find behind a desk than someone preparing to become a Marine. When she walked through the gates of Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, on a hot South Carolina morning in June, the drill instructors took one look at her and exchanged glances that said everything. She had grown up in a tough neighborhood in East Los Angeles, where being small meant you either learned to be smart or you learned to be tough. Maria had learned to be both. Her father had been a mechanic who worked 16-hour days to keep food on the table for his family of 6 children. Her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in Beverly Hills, leaving before dawn and returning after dark, her hands raw from chemicals and hard work. Money was always tight in the Santos household. Maria wore hand-me-downs from her older sisters and worked part-time jobs from the age of 14. She stocked shelves at the local grocery store, cleaned tables at a fast food restaurant, and tutored kids in math to earn extra money for her family. Despite the challenges, her parents had always emphasized education and hard work. When Maria graduated high school, college seemed impossible. The family couldn't afford tuition, and student loans felt overwhelming. She had watched her older brother Carlos struggle with debt after college, working 2 jobs just to make minimum payments on his student loans. The military offered a different path. It promised job training, education benefits, and a chance to serve her country. The decision to join the Marines specifically came after she met a female Marine recruiter at a career fair. Sergeant First Class Jennifer Torres was everything Maria admired: confident, capable, and strong. When Torres talked about the Marines, she didn't sugarcoat anything. She told Maria it would be the hardest thing she ever did, but also the most rewarding. "The Marines don't care where you come from or what you look like," Torres had said. "They care about what's inside you. They care about whether you have the heart to never give up." Maria knew she had that heart. She had been proving it her entire life. The bus ride to Paris Island had been long and quiet. Maria sat next to a window, watching the countryside change from urban sprawl to rural farmland. The other recruits on the bus were a mix of young men and women from all over the country. Some were big and obviously athletic. Others were average-sized but carried themselves with confidence. A few, like Maria, were smaller and kept to themselves. She used the quiet time to think about why she was here. It wasn't just about the benefits or the job training. Something deeper had called her to this path. Growing up, she had watched her community struggle with crime and poverty. She had seen too many of her friends make bad choices because they felt like they had no good options. The Marines represented something different: discipline, honor, and purpose. When they arrived at Paris Island, everything changed instantly. The moment the bus doors opened, drill instructors were screaming at them to move faster, stand straighter, and pay attention. The chaos was overwhelming and intentional. It was designed to strip away everything they thought they knew about themselves and start building them into Marines from scratch. Maria found herself assigned to 3rd Battalion, where females went through their training. Her platoon had about 60 women from every background imaginable. There were college graduates and high school dropouts who had gotten their GED. There were athletes and bookworms. There were women from big cities and women from small towns where everyone knew everyone else. What they all had in common now was that they were starting from zero. The first weeks of training were a constant test of endurance. They woke up before dawn every day and went through physical training that pushed everyone to their limits: running, push-ups, sit-ups, obstacle courses, and long marches with heavy packs. Maria struggled with some of the physical demands, especially anything that required pure upper body strength. During pull-ups, she could barely manage 3, while some of the other women knocked out 15 or 20. On the obstacle course, she had trouble getting over some of the higher walls without assistance. The drill instructors noticed everything and let her know about it. Drill instructor Staff Sergeant Rebecca Morrison was particularly hard on Maria. Morrison was a career Marine who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had earned respect through her own toughness and competence. She was about 5 feet 8 inches tall, with the kind of presence that filled a room. When she looked at Maria, it was clear she had doubts. "Santos!" Morrison would yell during training. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't summer camp." The comments stung, but Maria had heard worse growing up. What bothered her more was that some of the other recruits started to echo the drill instructor's doubts. During breaks between training exercises, she would overhear conversations. "I don't know how Santos is going to make it through this," one recruit named Johnson would say. "She can barely do a pull-up." "Maybe she should have joined the Air Force," another recruit named Williams would add with a laugh. Maria never responded to these comments directly, but she absorbed them all. She used them as motivation to work harder. While the other recruits were resting during any free time they had, Maria was doing extra exercises. She would practice pull-ups on any bar she could find. She would run extra laps around the barracks. She would study the military knowledge they were learning until she knew it perfectly. The academic portions of training were where Maria truly excelled. Military history, weapons systems, field tactics, and leadership principles all came naturally to her. She had always been a strong student, and the structured learning environment played to her strengths. During written tests, she consistently scored in the top 5% of her platoon. But physical training remained a challenge, and the drill instructors continued to focus on her weaknesses. During combat training exercises, they would often use her as an example of what not to do. When the platoon struggled with a group exercise, the blame would often fall on her shoulders. "Santos is slowing down the whole platoon," Morrison would announce loudly. "When you're weak, you don't just hurt yourself, you hurt your team." The mental pressure was sometimes harder to deal with than the physical challenges. Maria had always been someone who succeeded through preparation and hard work, but here it felt like nothing she did was good enough. She started to wonder if she had made a mistake. Maybe the drill instructors were right. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. The lowest point came during the 4th week of training. The platoon was going through a combat simulation exercise where they had to work together to complete objectives under time pressure. Maria was assigned to a team with 4 other recruits, including Johnson and Williams, who had been questioning her abilities since day 1. The exercise involved carrying ammunition boxes across a field, setting up defensive positions, and then executing a coordinated movement to a new location. It required both physical strength and tactical thinking. Maria's team struggled from the beginning. The ammunition boxes were heavy, and she had trouble keeping pace with the others while carrying her assigned load. Halfway through the exercise, Williams stopped and turned to face Maria. "You're holding us back," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe you should just quit now and save everyone the trouble." Maria felt something inside her shift at that moment. All the frustration, all the self-doubt, all the anger at being constantly underestimated crystallized into a single thought. She was not going to quit. Not now, not ever. These people didn't know her story. They didn't know what she had overcome to get here. They didn't know what she was capable of when she was pushed too far. She looked Williams directly in the eye and said quietly, "I'm not going anywhere." The exercise continued, and Maria pushed herself harder than she had ever pushed before. She carried her ammunition box and helped others with theirs when they struggled. She took charge of the tactical planning when her teammates seemed confused about the objectives. By the end of the exercise, her team had completed their mission successfully, largely due to her leadership and determination. But the drill instructors didn't acknowledge her contributions. Morrison simply moved the platoon on to the next training exercise without comment. That night, as Maria lay in her bunk listening to the quiet sounds of 60 women sleeping around her, she made a promise to herself. She was going to prove every single person who doubted her wrong. She was going to show them that being small didn't mean being weak. She was going to demonstrate that there was more than one way to be strong. She didn't know it yet, but the opportunity to prove herself would come sooner than she expected, and it would involve 5 Marines who would seriously underestimate what the small woman from East Los Angeles was capable of. The weeks following Maria's quiet promise to herself brought a noticeable change in her performance, though the drill instructors seemed determined not to notice. She had started waking up an hour before the official reveille to practice exercises in the bathroom area where she wouldn't disturb her sleeping platoon mates. Push-ups, sit-ups, and stretching became her pre-dawn routine, performed in near-total darkness while the base slept around her. Her improvement was gradual but steady. The 3 pull-ups became 5, then 8, then 12. Her running times dropped consistently, and she no longer fell behind during the long marches with full packs. More importantly, her tactical thinking during exercises had begun to impress even her harshest critics among the other recruits. During a field navigation exercise in the 7th week, Maria's team had become lost in the dense South Carolina woods. The compass reading didn't match their map, and the team leader was becoming increasingly frustrated and panicked. Maria had quietly suggested a different approach to reading the terrain, drawing on knowledge she had gained from hours of studying topographical maps during her free time. "Look at the water flow patterns," she had whispered to the team leader. "The streams always flow downhill toward the main river. If we follow this smaller creek upstream, it should lead us to the ridgeline marked on our map." Her suggestion had been correct, and the team had successfully completed their objective. But when they returned to base, the team leader took full credit for the navigation success. Maria didn't say anything. She was learning to let her actions speak for themselves rather than seeking recognition for every contribution. The 8th week of training brought a new challenge that would change everything. The recruits were told they would be participating in a joint training exercise with male Marines from 2nd Battalion. These weren't recruits like themselves, but fully trained Marines who were serving as instructors and role players for various training scenarios. The exercise was designed to simulate a multi-day combat mission where male and female Marines would work together in realistic conditions. The female recruits would be evaluated not just on their individual performance, but on how well they integrated into mixed-gender teams under pressure. Staff Sergeant Morrison addressed the platoon the night before the exercise began. Her usual harsh demeanor was replaced by something more serious and focused. "Listen up, ladies," Morrison said. "Tomorrow you're going to be working alongside Marines who have been in combat. Real combat. They've been shot at, they've lost friends, and they've proven themselves in ways that matter. Some of them have opinions about women in combat roles. Some of those opinions might not be favorable." She paused and looked directly at Maria before continuing. "Your job is not to win their approval. Your job is not to prove that women can do everything men can do. Your job is to be the best Marine you can be and to complete your mission. Nothing more, nothing less." The next morning, the female recruits were transported to a different part of the base where they met their male counterparts for the first time. Maria found herself assigned to Team 7, which consisted of 4 female recruits and 5 male Marines who would serve as team leaders and evaluators. The 5 Marines assigned to her team were all staff sergeants or sergeants with combat experience. Their leader was Staff Sergeant Jake Rodriguez, a stocky man from Texas who had served 2 tours in Iraq. The others were Sergeant Mike Thompson from Ohio, Sergeant Dave Wilson from Montana, Sergeant Chris Parker from Florida, and Sergeant Tony Sullivan from New York. From the moment introductions were made, Maria could sense their skepticism. It wasn't openly hostile, but there was a distinct feeling that they were tolerating the presence of the female recruits rather than welcoming them as equals. Their body language was polite but distant, and their questions about the female recruits' capabilities seemed designed to find weaknesses rather than strengths. "So how much weight can you carry on a long march?" Rodriguez asked Maria directly. "Standard load is 55 pounds, Sergeant," Maria replied. "I can handle more if the mission requires it." Rodriguez exchanged a look with Thompson that clearly communicated doubt. "We'll see about that," he said. The first day of exercises went reasonably well. The tasks were mostly individual challenges that played to each person's strengths. Maria excelled at the communications exercises and map-reading challenges. During weapons maintenance, she was faster and more thorough than several of the male Marines, something that seemed to surprise them. But it was during the physical challenges that the real tension emerged. The afternoon included a series of combat simulation exercises that required carrying heavy equipment across difficult terrain. Maria struggled with some of the heavier loads, particularly a water purification system that weighed nearly 80 pounds. "Need help with that, Santos?" Sergeant Sullivan asked, but his tone made it clear he was asking more to prove a point than to actually help. "I've got it, Sergeant," Maria replied, though she was clearly straining. "Sure you do," Wilson muttered under his breath, just loud enough for everyone to hear. That evening, as the team sat around their field kitchen eating military rations, the conversation turned to combat experiences. The 5 Marines shared stories from their deployments, talking about firefights and improvised explosive devices and friends who didn't make it home. The female recruits listened respectfully, understanding that they were being allowed to hear experiences that had shaped these men in fundamental ways. But as the evening progressed, some of the stories seemed designed to make a point about physical strength and combat readiness. Rodriguez told a detailed story about having to carry a wounded Marine over rough terrain for more than 2 miles while under enemy fire. "The thing is," Rodriguez said, looking directly at Maria, "in combat there's no such thing as good enough for your size or good enough for a woman. Either you can carry your buddy to safety or you can't. Either you can hump a ruck for 20 miles without slowing down your unit or you can't. There's no participation trophies in a firefight." Maria understood the message clearly. She also understood that Rodriguez was probably right about combat requirements. But she also knew there was more to being a Marine than just physical strength, and she was getting tired of being judged only on that single dimension. The second day of training brought more complex scenarios that required teamwork and tactical thinking. Maria's performance was strong in areas that required quick decision-making and adaptability. During a simulated ambush scenario, she was the first to identify the direction of incoming fire and suggested a counterattack route that successfully completed the objective. But the 5 Marines seemed more focused on her struggles with the physical demands than her successes with the mental challenges. During a break between exercises, she overheard Parker talking to the other Marines. "I don't know what they're thinking, putting someone like that in a combat role," Parker said. "She's tough enough mentally, I'll give her that. But when things get physical, she's a liability." "It's not her fault," Thompson added. "The system is setting her up to fail by pretending there are no physical standards that matter." Maria felt her anger building, but she kept quiet. She had learned not to respond to every slight or criticism. But inside, she was planning something. She was going to find a way to demonstrate that physical strength wasn't the only thing that mattered in combat situations. The opportunity came on the 3rd and final day of training. The exercise was designed as a final test that would incorporate everything they had learned. Teams would be given a complex mission with multiple objectives, and they would be evaluated on their ability to adapt to changing circumstances and work together under pressure. Team 7's mission was to secure a mock enemy position, extract intelligence materials, and evacuate through a designated route while avoiding or engaging simulated enemy forces. The scenario was designed to last several hours and would test every aspect of their training. As the team prepared for the mission, Rodriguez took Maria aside for a private conversation. "Look, Santos," he said, "I'm going to be straight with you. This final exercise is going to be intense. If you're not sure you can keep up, this is your chance to say so. There's no shame in knowing your limitations." Maria looked Rodriguez in the eye and said, "I understand the exercise requirements, Sergeant. I'm ready." Rodriguez nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't convinced. "Okay, just remember this isn't about proving anything to anyone. This is about completing the mission safely." What Rodriguez didn't understand was that Maria had been proving things to people her entire life. She had proven to her teachers that a girl from her neighborhood could excel academically. She had proven to her family that she could contribute financially while still focusing on her education. She had proven to the drill instructors that she could meet their standards despite their initial doubts. Now she was going to prove to 5 experienced Marines that they had seriously underestimated what the small woman from East Los Angeles was capable of. She just didn't know yet that the proof would come in a way that none of them expected. The mission began at dawn, and Team 7 moved out toward their objective with confidence and purpose. Maria carried her standard load and kept pace with the others without difficulty. The physical training of the past several weeks was paying off, and she felt stronger and more capable than she had since arriving at Paris Island. But as they approached their target area, it became clear that this exercise was about to become more challenging than any of them had anticipated. The exercise had been going smoothly for the first 2 hours. Team 7 had successfully navigated to their target area and was conducting reconnaissance of the mock enemy position when everything changed. The training scenario called for them to identify enemy positions and plan their assault, but as they observed the target building, it became clear that the opposing force had more personnel than intelligence had indicated. "This doesn't match our briefing," Rodriguez whispered into his radio, as the team crouched behind a tree line about 200 meters from their objective. "We're seeing at least 12 hostiles instead of the 6 we were told to expect." The response from command crackled through his earpiece. "Mission parameters have changed. Adapt and overcome. Complete your objectives." It was exactly the kind of curveball that military training was designed to throw at them. In real combat, intelligence was often incomplete or wrong, and Marines had to adjust their plans accordingly. But as Rodriguez studied the new situation, it was clear that their original approach wouldn't work. "We need to revise our strategy," he said to the team during a quick huddle. "With 12 hostiles, a direct assault is going to be too risky. We need a distraction or a way to draw some of them away from the main building." The 5 Marines began discussing various options, most of which involved complex flanking maneuvers or waiting for additional support that might not come. As Maria listened to their conversation, she could see a solution that they were missing. It was risky and unconventional, but it could work. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said quietly, "what if we create a diversion at the vehicle checkpoint about 400 meters to the east? If I can get in position there and simulate an attack, it might draw half their force away from the main building." Rodriguez looked at her skeptically. "That's a solo mission, Santos. You'd be on your own against an unknown number of hostiles. If they capture you instead of pursuing you, the whole mission fails." "The terrain between here and the checkpoint gives me multiple escape routes," Maria replied. "And if they capture me, you still have the option to proceed with a smaller assault force against a reduced enemy." Sergeant Thompson shook his head. "It's too risky. What if you can't handle whoever they send after you?" Maria felt the familiar frustration rising, but she kept her voice calm and professional. "I can handle it, Sergeant." The 5 Marines exchanged looks that communicated their doubt clearly. Parker finally spoke what they were all thinking. "Santos, this isn't about being tough or proving yourself. This is about realistic assessment of capabilities. If this were a real mission, we couldn't afford to lose someone on a high-risk diversion." "With respect, Sergeant," Maria replied, "you're making assumptions about my capabilities based on limited information. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to trust me to do my job." Rodriguez considered the options for a long moment. The mission clock was ticking, and they needed to make a decision. Finally, he nodded grimly. "All right, Santos. You get one shot at this. If it doesn't work, you abort and return immediately. No heroics. Maria moved through the forest toward the vehicle checkpoint with a mixture of excitement and determination. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for, a chance to show what she could do when the situation required more than just physical strength. The checkpoint was manned by 3 Marines playing the role of enemy sentries. Maria's plan was to create enough commotion to draw additional forces from the main building, then use her knowledge of the terrain to lead them on a pursuit that would take them away from Team 7's assault route. She approached the checkpoint from the south, using the thick underbrush to get within 50 meters undetected. Then she initiated her simulated attack with blank rounds fired toward the checkpoint position. The 3 sentries immediately took cover and began returning fire while calling for reinforcements. Maria saw 4 additional Marines running toward the checkpoint from the main building, exactly what she had hoped for. But as she began her planned withdrawal, she realized that the 7 Marines were not pursuing her as expected. Instead, they were attempting to surround her position. This was not part of the plan. In a real exercise like this, the opposing force was supposed to either pursue or return to their positions, not attempt a complex encirclement of a single person. But as Maria assessed her situation, she realized that the exercise controllers had probably changed the rules again to create additional challenges. She found herself in a small clearing with dense forest on 3 sides and the 7 Marines closing in from different directions. In a real combat situation, this would be extremely dangerous. In a training exercise with blank rounds, it was simply a tactical problem that needed a solution. Maria's mind raced through her options. She could surrender and accept capture, which would mean failure for her mission. She could try to break through their encirclement, which would likely result in her being tagged out by multiple opponents. Or she could use the environment and their expectations against them. She chose the third option. Maria had noticed during their earlier exercises that the 5 Marines from her team, along with most of their opponents, approached tactical problems in conventional ways. They thought in terms of fire and maneuver, suppression and assault, and direct confrontation. But growing up in East Los Angeles had taught her that sometimes the best strategy was to be unpredictable. Instead of trying to fight her way out or run away, Maria did something none of them expected. She moved toward the center of their encirclement and went completely silent. The 7 Marines had been converging on her last known position, expecting either gunfire or movement that would reveal her location. Instead, they found nothing. Maria had used the thick underbrush to move to a position that none of them were watching, directly between 2 of their advancing elements. As they searched for her, calling out tactical communications to coordinate their sweep, Maria was able to identify the exact position of each Marine. More importantly, she could see that they had spread themselves out in a pattern that left each of them vulnerable to attack from an unexpected direction. What happened next became legendary at Paris Island, though the details were debated for years afterward. Maria used the terrain and her small size to move through the underbrush almost silently, positioning herself behind the 1st Marine, Sergeant Sullivan from New York. In training exercises like this, a touch on the shoulder while remaining undetected simulated a successful stealth attack. Sullivan was eliminated from the exercise before he even knew she was there. The 2nd Marine fell to the same tactic. Sergeant Parker was focused on the area where he thought Maria was hiding when he felt a tap on his back. He spun around to find Maria crouched behind him, having approached through a drainage ditch he hadn't considered as a possible route. The elimination of 2 Marines caused confusion among the remaining 5, who were now spread across a wider area and trying to figure out where their colleagues had gone. Maria used this confusion to her advantage, moving through the forest with a speed and stealth that surprised everyone, including herself. Sergeant Wilson was the 3rd to fall. He had been positioned to watch a game trail that seemed like the most obvious escape route when Maria approached from above, having climbed a fallen tree that gave her an elevated position he hadn't considered. Thompson and Rodriguez were the final two Marines from her original team, and they had realized by now that they were dealing with something they hadn't expected. They moved back to back, trying to cover all directions simultaneously while calling out to the two remaining Marines from the opposing force. But Maria had spent the past several minutes studying their positions and movements. She knew that Thompson favored his right side and consistently left his left flank less protected. She knew that Rodriguez was an experienced Marine who would be difficult to surprise with conventional tactics. So she used unconventional tactics. Maria created a small disturbance in the brush about 30 meters to Thompson's right, causing him to turn and focus his attention in that direction. While he was looking the wrong way, she approached from behind and to his left, using a route that took her through terrain she had memorized during their earlier reconnaissance. Thompson felt the tap on his shoulder and turned to see Maria emerging from what had looked like impenetrable underbrush. "How the hell did you get there?" he asked, genuinely impressed despite being eliminated from the exercise. Rodriguez was the final Marine, and by now he understood that he was facing someone who thought about tactical problems differently than he did. He had taken a defensive position with good cover and clear fields of fire in all directions. Getting close enough to tag him would require crossing open ground where he could easily spot her. Maria studied his position for several minutes, looking for any weakness or blind spot she could exploit. Finally, she found it. Rodriguez was positioned to cover the horizontal approaches to his location, but he hadn't considered the possibility of a vertical approach. There was a large oak tree about 20 feet from Rodriguez's position, with branches that extended over his location. Maria climbed the tree as silently as possible, moving slowly to avoid shaking the branches or making any noise that would give away her position. When she was directly above Rodriguez, she dropped down behind him with enough force to simulate a successful attack while avoiding any actual impact that could cause injury. Rodriguez felt her land behind him and heard her say quietly, "You're eliminated, Sergeant." He turned around to find Maria crouched behind him, breathing hard but smiling. "Santos," he said, "that was incredible. How did you learn to move like that?" "Growing up in my neighborhood," Maria replied. "You learn to avoid trouble by being places people don't expect you to be." The exercise controllers who had been monitoring the situation declared the diversion mission a complete success. Not only had Maria drawn the opposing force away from the main building as planned, but she had eliminated all 7 Marines who had attempted to surround her. But the real impact of what had happened became clear when Team 7 regrouped after completing their overall mission. The 5 Marines who had been questioning Maria's capabilities throughout the training exercise now looked at her with something approaching awe. "Santos," Rodriguez said as they prepared for the debrief, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We were judging you based on conventional standards and missing what you were actually capable of." Sergeant Thompson nodded in agreement. "In 20 years of military service, I've never seen anyone move through terrain like that or think about tactical problems from those angles." The debriefing session with the exercise controllers was equally revealing. The senior instructor, a major who had been observing the exercise from a command post, addressed Maria directly. "Recruit Santos," he said, "what you accomplished today demonstrated several things that we look for in potential leaders. You identified a tactical opportunity that others missed. You volunteered for a high-risk mission when it would have been easier to stay safe. And you executed that mission using techniques that showed creativity and adaptability." He paused and looked around at the entire team. "But most importantly, you proved that there are many different ways to be strong, and that we sometimes miss potential because we're looking for strength in only one form." The ride back to the recruit barracks was quiet, but the atmosphere was completely different from the previous days. The 5 Marines who had questioned Maria's place in their corps were now discussing her tactics and asking questions about her background and training. Maria spent the ride looking out the window at the South Carolina landscape, thinking about the phone call she would make to her parents that evening. She would tell them about the exercise and the successful mission, but more importantly, she would tell them that she had found her place. When they arrived back at Paris Island, Staff Sergeant Morrison was waiting for the female recruits with an expression that Maria couldn't read. As the group approached, Morrison called out specifically to Maria. "Santos, front and center!" Maria jogged over to Morrison, expecting another criticism or correction. Instead, Morrison looked her in the eye and said, "I heard about what you did out there today. I want you to know that I was wrong about you. You have what it takes to be a Marine." It was the first time Morrison had spoken to Maria without criticism or doubt in her voice. More importantly, it was confirmation that Maria had finally proven what she had always known, that being small didn't mean being weak, and that strength came in many forms. That night, as Maria lay in her bunk listening to the familiar sounds of the barracks around her, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the tough streets of East Los Angeles to the training grounds of Paris Island, she had been proving herself every step of the way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate what she was capable of. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at Marine training, Maria Santos fell asleep knowing that she belonged exactly where she was.